chose my EPQ question as what is the main motive of a serial killer and were they born to be a killer? Now, I chose this topic because I enjoy the focus of serial killers and it interests me, and I've applied for a criminology course at university because one day I hope to become a homicide detective. I decided to focus my EPQ on 3 serial killers. Now, some people get different types of killing mixed up. So a serial killer, as defined by Oxford Dictionary, is a person who commits a series of murders, often with no apparent motive and typically following a characteristic predictable behaviour pattern. Now, serial killing is different to terrorism, as that is a type of mass murder in the name of politics and religion. A mass murder occurs when several victims are murdered at the same time and place. A spree murder is when several victims are in a short space of time and different places. Whereas a serial murder is several victims with a significant amount of time between the murders. After researching the definitions of different types of killing, I produced a list of serial killers to further research, namely Ted Bundy, Eileen Wuornos, Jeffrey Dahmer, Pedro Lopez, and John Wayne Gacy. Now, I narrowed my list down to Bundy, Dahmer, and Gacy as they were the cases who had the most unusual upbringings, unique killing style, and extended time on court. This allowed me to thoroughly study their cases as it was a smaller list. I used websites such as the US Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Center of Crime and Justice Studies, as these had .gov URLs and are reliable to source. During my project, my computer broke, deleting my file with my essay plan, references, and their evaluations. As a result of this, I had to start emailing myself the essay after starting it again to make sure that I didn't lose it. Additionally, we had to keep a track of our project as we go through it, but the type of tracking that they asked us to do wasn't great for me as it wasn't flexible enough to allow for things like computers breaking. As a result of this, I chose to do it in a table as I could put the tasks and the dates that it took me to do the tasks so that I could move them around where necessary. First, I chose to study Ted Bundy, the lady killer, who lived between 1946 and 1989. Ted Bundy has only 20 confirmed murders, but is suspected of over 100. He was an illegitimate child who never knew his father and had a strained relationship with his stepfather. Despite the fact that lots of people think that serial killing is based on later life, Ted Bundy displayed unusual behaviour from a young age in which he surrounded his aunt, who he thought was his sister, with knives whilst she slept. Ted Bundy had his first confirmed attack on the 4th of January 1974 of an 18-year-old woman who he raped and assaulted in her own bed after sneaking in, leaving her with permanent mental and physical disabilities. However, he didn't kill Karen Sparks. From Jan to June 1974, female college students disappeared every week, and he collected Polaroids of his victims after killing them. He would appear in need of help, asking them to help carry bags or wearing slings or having crutches with him to lure his victims so that he could attack them. Now, Freud's psychodynamic approach would theorise that Bundy's offences were determined by the lack of a father figure in his early life. This would offer no justice to the victims' families, as it offers an external explanation for his crimes instead of his own motives. The FBI's top-down approach, however, was based off of Bundy's case, classing him as an organised killer and suggesting premeditation. Bundy was executed by electric chair. Next, I chose to study Jeffrey Dahmer, who lived between 1960 and 1994 and was convicted of 17 crimes. Like Bundy, he had a rather absent father, and his mother was also absent. And he had an odd fascination with bones, especially the sounds they made. He would collect large insects and animal carcasses at a young age, whilst he was moving around and keep them in jars. His first victim was Stephen Hicks, aged 18, after he realised that he was a homosexual during puberty. Once he realised that Hick was heterosexual, he bludgeoned him to death, and after killing him, dissolved his flesh in acid and crushed the bones with a sledgehammer. He then went on to retain genitalia in jars, as well as skulls that he would use to pleasure himself. He suffered from a severe personality disorder. However, despite this, he was declared legally insane and convicted of his crimes. Before he could be punished by a capital punishment, he was killed by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver. Next was John Wayne Gacy, who used a handcuff trick to lure in his victims. He would handcuff himself and hide a key so that he could unlock it and get out. And then when he let them try, he would not give them the key so that they were stuck and he could do as he wanted with them. Like Dahmer, he was a homosexual but was closeted and didn't tell either of his wives what he was getting up to. He would make his workers at his clown job watch stag films and perform oral sex with him, and they would hide them under the temporary bed until he could bury them in the crawl space and dispose of them with quicklime. Sutherland's differential association hypothesis argued that his first offence, when it resulted in his prison sentence, was the reason for how he became how he was, because originally he only assaulted someone, but then because he was learning the other behaviours in prison, he decided that they were his role models and he was going to commit those kind of crimes as well. In conclusion, there is lots of different theories for why people behave the way they do when it comes to serial killing. However, Fountalakis studied male prisoners and found that 16.2% of homicides are linked to a type of paranoid or schizotypal personality disorder, which is a higher percentage compared to other ones. Because even though the 66.9% had other different types of personality disorder, these weren't actually linked to homicides because they didn't have the compulsions and obsessions linked with them. If I was to do this project again, I would widen my list of serial killers, as I only studied male killers. This had an aspect of androcentrism in my study. I would also use a meta-analysis to study the killers of many cultures, as I realised I only used US serial killers, so this wasn't really overall for serial killers. The EPQ has taught me how to kind of write an university essay and the referencing style needed for it. And my advice to future EPQ students is to keep in touch with your supervisor mainly, and to make sure that you save your essay, because you can lose it when your computer breaks. And pick a topic that you want, because as you can see, this is not a usual topic, but it's something that interests me, so it's best to do it that way. Now, any questions? Sarah?
Who do you find most interesting to research?
I found Jeffrey Dahmer most interesting to research because I've never heard of a serial killer that starts off with animals before, but he did. Abby?
Do you know the prison sentences for Jeffrey Dahmer?
Jeffrey Dahmer. I'm pretty sure he gathered 25 life sentences overall for different crimes. Abby?
What was the Eileen Warnos case?
Eileen Warnos was a prostitute in Florida who shot dead and robbed 7 of her male clients after hitchhiking in their vans. However, I didn't think that this was enough, I know it's going to sound bad, but enough serial killing to be classed in this essay.
What's your outlook on the death penalty for serial killers like Dahmer, serial killers in general?
I think that it should be partially relative to whether they're declared legally sane or not, because if they're declared legally insane, then someone else has failed to look after them properly. But if they are legally sane and committed these crimes, especially if they have motives that aren't just people hurting them, then they should be punished by capital punishment.
So you mentioned that a lot of it was linked to personality disorder and other mental disorders. Do you think that these things could be prevented by screening people that show signs of, for example, playing with dead animals is a highlight of potentially going to be a serial killer. Do you think screening more screening more things like that could prevent serial killers becoming serial killers?
I think they can. Definitely screening them would help, but that doesn't mean that you should assume they're going to do these things, because a lot of people with personality disorders live normal lives, especially when medicated. It's the ones that go unnoticed that end up like this.
How did your interest spark?
At a young age, I was watching crime documentaries with my parents and ended up being quite interested in it, and it's just carried on, yes.
Any questions? Fascinating topic.